Hi everyone, this is Sarah and Tracy with Natural Shore, and this month for book club we are featuring Gathering Moss by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She also is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, which you might recognize. This book details everything about mosses, and she does it in a very interesting way with storytelling and then kind of tying it into information with her thesis work. So yeah, it's very interesting. Mosses are so small and I never give them much thought, but I learned all about their lives and their reproduction.
Yeah, it's usually, trees and flowers and big grasses, showy grasses that get all the attention, but mosses have super interesting life cycles and are found everywhere. I really like the chapter where she talks about the mosses you find in the cities, like they're in the cracks of everything, and she can recognize them from city to city, and I thought that was super interesting. I also liked how she talks about how a lot of them don't really have common names. They just go into like the scientific names, and a lot of scientists are the ones that can tell them apart, and they just haven't really garnered a lot of attention to get enough common names. So that's kind of nice to me, where you learn them by their scientific names and don't have to go backwards and learn all these other different common names for them. But yeah, like you said, she was really good at writing. I really liked Braiding Sweetgrass. She goes into how she's been making observations in her personal life in the woods, and she had questions about these different mosses, and then goes on to research them and answer those questions. So I thought that was interesting, how it's a story and then it goes into how she goes and answers these scientific questions.
Yeah,
so
it's very easy to read. It wasn't too scientific, but
yeah. And they have very interesting sexual reproduction methods. They rely a lot on water, so it's really great that it's raining now. We can talk about how they use water droplets to carry like the sperm to the egg in a lot of the different species of moss. They also use the raindrops when they hit the moss. It distributes the spores out, which I thought was pretty interesting. So it's really cool how she brings it back to water and how important that is for their life cycle.
yeah, she noted that they can dry up to 98% and still survive and live until it rains again. So it kind of makes me wonder in this drought year how mosses are doing. She also talked about asexual reproduction and just all the different reproductive strategies that these different species use under different circumstances and different microclimates.
She talks a lot about the boundary layer, which is a specific layer that these mosses live in they're so close to the ground that the ground really protects them from the wind and the elements, and it's its own little microclimate. So that was really interesting too. And she talks about how the different species have very specific habitats that they grow on. There's one called splash. It's hard. It was really interesting to hear all the different scientific names too. But splatchnum only grows on white-tailed deer droppings, so it's a very narrow niche that these different mosses occupy, which I thought was super interesting. She talks about finding different splatchnum and getting really excited about finding it, even though you're essentially finding deer poop, but it's really interesting how they grow on those different mediums and stuff like that. Rocks, trees, cracks in the sidewalks. Like I said, they're really interesting how they can just adapt to different situations.
Yeah, so throughout the first half or so of the book, she kind of details all the different parts of moss life. And then toward the end of the book, she starts talking a little bit more about challenges to mosses. She talks about this very wealthy person that's trying to recreate mosses in their formal gardens, and how this person hired a crew to go kind of mine mosses to put them into the landscape. And she also talked about people who are harvesting mosses from public lands, which is legal and it has a certain permit process, but it doesn't sound like it's very enforced or regulated. So I didn't know that about mosses. I thought that was really interesting. Kind of a sad note to end the book, but also something to think about and recognize.
Yeah, she talks a lot about her Native American heritage and a philosophy of being stewards to the land, and how taking the moss takes care of the land, and we have to be like moss and work towards being good stewards to the environment. She talked about how they were studying a piece of land that used to be a highly polluted site, and the mosses were like the first things to come back and colonize it. And they were also a nursery medium for different tree species and plant species that came. The seeds wanted to germinate more on the mosses and other areas of the land. So like Sarah was talking about, that owner who had moss on his property but then wanted to move it into his former gardens. It just kind of makes you think about maybe we should reorganize our thinking a little bit and our culture a little bit, and go towards, maybe instead of bringing these things artificially into our homes or onto our formal gardens, we're the ones that maybe should go out and just enjoy them in nature, enjoy them where they're found naturally. I mean, the moss she was talking about, it was thousands of years old. It takes a long time for these mosses to grow, and he had an idea of how he wanted his garden to look and thought it would look more natural, but in the process he kind of was destroying it, and he could have just gone hiking in his big, giant estate and seen it that way. So it was informative. It was getting you to think about how we should treat the land and notice the small things, appreciate the small things, and I really enjoyed the book. It was a quick read, but very in-depth. You learn a lot and you think a lot, and it makes you want to go out into the woods and sleep on a bed of mosses.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe when it's warmer out. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. I thought it was a great book. I hope she keeps writing these types of books and we can keep learning more. And yeah, everyone start appreciating the mosses around you, learn more about them. They're everywhere. They're probably in the cracks of your sidewalk, and they serve a very important purpose in our landscape. So
yeah,
read the book.
Yeah, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.